Disclaimer here, I am not making any medical claims whatsoever about anything discussed in this video. This is purely a video about public policy only. All right, guys, so I caught this press conference here from the Republican governor of Nebraska, the great state of Nebraska, Pete Ricketts, okay? And he is talking about marijuana, right? Their state is considering legalizing medical marijuana. Now, there was a ballot initiative that was taken off of the ballot in 2020 because of a Supreme Court ruling about the constitutionality of it. However, state legislators have proposed legislation to legalize medical marijuana, and that's currently the debate that's going on in Nebraska. Now, the governor decided that he wanted to weigh in on this, okay, and he's going to give his opinion on legalizing marijuana. Now, I haven't talked about this that much, but I think that this is a very important issue with Republicans and conservatives because, in my opinion, I think that this is a layup issue that Republicans are missing out on because of feelings, not necessarily facts. I think this is an issue that would put them in a better standing with the general public. I'm gonna let the governor here give his argument, and then I'm gonna show you guys Matt Gaetz and his argument in regards to marijuana, and then I'll give you guys my opinion. So let's take a listen at Mr. Ricketts here.
This is something that is harming our young people. And it continues on through the workforce. If you look at states like Oregon, Nevada, and Colorado, who have legalized marijuana, you see that use goes up dramatically in their workforce by numbers like 63% in Oregon, 55% in Nevada, and 47% in Colorado. And ultimately, this has a huge human toll. People like Levi Pongi, who ingested a marijuana cookie and then jumped off a balcony and killed himself. Or Mark Bullard, 23 years old, who had no history of mental illness, ingested high levels of THC, and committed suicide. And more recently, I was made aware of a family who is struggling with the exposure to marijuana from other family members, and a 7-year-old testing positive for THC, native THC. So this is a dangerous drug that will impact our kids. If you legalize marijuana, you're going to kill your kids. That's what the data shows from around the country. And that's why it's dangerous to go around the established process we have to determine whether or not drugs are safe and effective, and why legalizing marijuana and going around the regulatory process to keep people safe is dangerous and going to harm our kids.
That is Republican Governor Pete Ricketts' argument regarding why marijuana should not be legal. Now, let's take a listen at Matt Gaetz, right, who's in the House of Representatives. He's a Republican. Let's take a listen at his argument regarding marijuana legalization.
Floor is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. The MORE Act is flawed. It uses cannabis policy to do a great deal of social engineering, to create new taxes and new programs and redistribution of assets. But I am here as the only Republican co-sponsor of the MORE Act, and I'm voting for it. Because the federal government has lied to the people of this country about marijuana for a generation. We have seen a generation, particularly of black and brown youth, locked up for offenses that should have not resulted in any incarceration whatsoever. I'm also deeply troubled that the current policy of the federal government inhibits research into cannabis, research that could unlock cures and help people live better lives. My Republican colleagues today will make a number of arguments against this bill, but those arguments are overwhelmingly losing with the American people. In every state where cannabis reform was on the ballot in this country, it passed. It passed with overwhelming support. Matter of fact, the only thing that I know that's more popular than getting out of the war on drugs is getting out of the war in Afghanistan. But if we were measuring the success in the war on drugs, it would be hard to conclude anything other than the fact that drugs have won. because the American people do not support the policies of incarceration, limited research, limited choice, and particularly constraining medical application. We are here in a time where many people in our country are suffering. They are in pain, and it is documented that states with medical cannabis programs see a reduction in the prescribing of opioids and the number of opioid abuses and deaths. We've held hearings in the House Judiciary Committee where people in our government must confess that this is in fact true, that the more we give people access to medical cannabis programs, the more we see a blunting of this horrible scourge of opioid addiction and opioid abuse. We talk all the time on the right about the need to empower people and empower states. Right now, the federal policy on cannabis constrains our people. It limits our states. And I would only hope that in the 117th Congress, after this bill invariably dies in the Senate, that we'll actually come back and pass the States Act, because the States Act acknowledges that we have screwed this up in the federal government. And while we've screwed it up, states have taken action. They've designed programs in the way that our great federalist system promises. And if we were to pass the States Act, then best practices would emerge. States that developed applicable programs for their people would be replicable, and we would see better policies. I'm going to vote for the MORE Act. It won't pass the Senate. It won't become law. But then we should come back in the 117th Congress, and we should truly do more for our people.
I'm 100% with Matt Gaetz. This issue right here is an issue that Republicans are getting wrong, right? They're screwing it up, and there's no reason why. There's literally no reason why. Because, guys, if I told you that guns are bad, that guns should be banned because people die from gun violence, who uses that argument? The Democrats. Who uses the argument that if you don't wear a face mask, then grandma might die? The Democrats. Which party has spent the last year fighting back against the overreach of the federal government and some of these state dictators in regards to some of the policies that have been implemented because of this pandemic, in which people felt like their personal freedoms have been taken away, all in the name of trying to keep people safe? Conservatives, Republicans. But yet when it comes to the issue of marijuana, we have a Republican governor telling people that marijuana should be illegal. Medical marijuana. We're not even talking about recreational. He's talking about medical marijuana because it will kill kids. And there's no facts, no data to back that up. Matter of fact, if you want to talk about the data. So there was a research letter that talks about the association of marijuana laws with teen marijuana use, right? Because a part of the argument against legalization that, well, you know, if we legalize it, then more kids are going to have access to it. More kids are going to use it. And the results show that, quote, consistent with the results of previous researchers, there was no evidence that the legalization of medical marijuana encourages marijuana use among youth. Moreover, the estimates reported in the table show that marijuana use among youth may actually decline after legalization for recreational purposes. This latter result is consistent with findings of Dilly et al. And with the argument that it's more difficult for teenagers to obtain marijuana as drug dealers are replaced by licensed dispensaries that require proof of age. Again, there's multiple studies, guys, that have shown that this idea that legalizing marijuana is going to encourage teens to use it or is going to lead to some type of, you know, society that's steeped in drug users. It's just not true, guys. It's not true. And I don't understand how we can be the party of freedom, right? The party of individualism, individual liberty. But in that same breath, turn around and tell people that they can't put a substance like marijuana in their body. I really don't understand. I really don't. Because again, for all the pushback that conservatives have given against, the government overreach, which I 100% agree with when it comes to this pandemic, with the government trying to restrict our religious freedoms, right? Our freedoms to practice our religion, because the government's trying to keep us safe. They're using this same big government argument to justify trying to keep us safe from using marijuana. They're using the same exact arguments that the liberals use to enforce their authoritarian policies on us because of the pandemic to justify keeping marijuana illegal. And we know, according to the DEA, that marijuana has not killed anybody. Okay? Do I think marijuana is a miracle drug? No, I don't. Right? Can there be some medical benefits to it? Sure. Right? Particularly, there's been research regarding epilepsy. Right? That type of stuff deserves more research. We need to know more about it. And we can't as long as it stays illegal at the federal level. It hinders progress. It hinders change on an issue that actually needs to be changed. And don't get me wrong, I understand the arguments against it, guys. I understand people being hesitant because they say, well, it smells bad. And is it going to lead to harder drug use? Are we going to have a society of drug users? Well, one, we're already a society of drug users. We have alcohol and opioids, right? It's just drugs that the federal government has told you, hey, it's okay for you to use. And a lot of these opioids, right? A lot of these prescription drugs are just as dangerous. It's just that the big government has told you that it's okay for you to use that, aka Big Pharma, right? Who's bought and paid for the government, right? And then we also have an underground market of drug use, right? That already exists. Would you rather drug dealers make money off drugs, selling drugs, or would you rather it be legalized, taxed, and regulated? Having some of that tax money that's only being paid for by people that use that drug, not paid for by anybody else. Would you rather that money be used to help, fund other education programs or whatever, and to help people get off harder drugs? Or would you rather just keep it illegal and let all the drug dealers get all the money? Because that's what happens. That's what happens. Right? People make this same argument about guns. And Second Amendment advocates, the first thing they say is, if you make guns illegal, it creates a black market for guns. That's the argument that's always used to defend gun rights, guys. And I will defend your Second Amendment rights as long as I live. But when it comes to freedom and individual liberty, right? Specifically when it comes to a drug that really people can argue is less harmful than alcohol, I really don't understand why Republicans have not jumped on this issue. They should be all over legalizing, taxing, and regulating. It is a fiscally conservative policy that can allow Republicans to do so much, but we're not doing it because it's almost like we're steeped in this social conservatism that's not based in facts or reality when it comes to this specific issue, right? Again, I mean, this type of stuff, the American people have spoken. Anytime this is put on the ballot, like Matt Gaetz said, people are voting for it. People want it. And then again, that doesn't mean everything people want is good. I don't think that, but I think in this situation, this is good. Now, some people might say, well, why stop at this? Why not legalize all drugs? Now, there's a libertarian argument for that, but I don't subscribe to that argument. I think that when it comes to legalization of certain drugs, I think that you got to look at the overall negative versus positive externalities associated with having a black market versus legalized, tax, and regulated. So that means that the negative externalities of legalizing cocaine may overcome, right, whatever positive benefits that may be associated with legalization, right? Or whatever negative externalities that may be associated with the black market. It may be better to keep cocaine illegal. I'm not necessarily saying that all drugs should be legalized. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think a drug like marijuana, that's definitely not completely harmless. I don't buy into that either. Obviously, there's some negative effects associated with it. But I think that the positive externalities of legalization, legalize, tax, and regulate, significantly outweigh the negative externalities from it. I really do. I just don't understand why the Republican Party just can't get it on this issue. This is a layup. And I hate when Republicans miss layups, right? Because right now the Republicans need as many layups as they can get. This is a layup. And this governor, coming out and saying something like this is just not a good look. Most people are going to look at this and be like, come on, man. That's what people are going to do. So, I agree with Matt Gaetz on this, right? I think the federal government has got it wrong. I think the Republican Party has got it wrong on this. I think this is an issue that they need to evolve on. I think they need to push forward with this issue. I think they need to make this issue, a part of the party platform, because this is an easy win that most of the American people agree on, and it is pro-freedom and liberty. And we cannot claim to be the pro-freedom and liberty party, right? All about having individual rights, individualism, when on an issue like this, a slam dunk layup issue like this, we continue to use the same arguments that Democrats use to pose their own authoritarian policies on us during a pandemic. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.